If you scroll social media, you've probably heard the term functional freeze. It's the popular new label for functioning normally, but feeling emotionally numb, disconnected, or stuck inside. A feeling of paralysis in decision-making and motivation, despite feeling productive. Functional freeze is a trendy new term, but traditional psychotherapy and academic psychology have better names for what's really going on. It isn't that you're frozen, it's that you've mentally blocked out feelings, or you've given up hope and feel helpless. For over a century, therapists have called blocking out feelings isolation of affect. It's a defense mechanism. Meanwhile, experimental psychologists for the past 50 or 60 years have called giving up hope and feeling helpless learned helplessness. I'll explain both of these and why they're a lot more useful than the new made-up term functional freeze. I'm Dr. Stephen Reidbord, a longtime psychiatrist and psychiatric educator, and this is More Than Meds. On social media, functional freeze is called a stress response, like fight or flight. Often it's recited as fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. This is usually described in nervous system terms to make it sound more scientific. And in truth, under acute stress, animals and people do sometimes freeze. Classic example is a deer caught in the headlights, or someone too scared to move. But functional freeze is a contradiction in terms. The person is still functioning, but feeling what? Emotionally frozen? A deer caught in the headlights doesn't feel frozen, but goes on with its usual activities. A person scared stiff by an attacker in a dark alley doesn't feel frozen inside, but goes on and buys the groceries in that state. What people are calling functional freeze is not an acute stress response like fight or flight. Psychoanalysts and psychodynamic therapists like myself have for many years had another way to understand one of the possible things that's going on. We call it isolation of affect. Affect means emotion or feeling. It's a defense mechanism like denial or projection that protects you from an unwanted, unpleasant feeling inside. Picture a person who witnessed a horrible car accident, but later goes on to describe it to other people in a monotone voice. They were there, they know what happened, they can describe what happened, but they're protecting themselves from the terrible feelings associated with it. Or someone who goes to the funeral of a close friend or relative, but when they're there, they feel numb and disconnected from what's going on. They're defending against their feelings. These are extreme examples, but minor ones occur all the time. In everyone's life, there's a lot of things that we need to do or know we have to do, but we don't want to. Our heart isn't in it or makes us feel really uncomfortable. So we go through the motions, we do what we have to do, and we block out our feelings about it. We isolate our affect. Unfortunately, isolation of affect can look like laziness. Our emotions are the propulsion that gets us to do things. Without the emotional charge, even if it's a negative feeling like anger or fear, thoughts like I need to clean the house or I need to do my taxes are just dry facts like water is wet. They're not motivating. That isn't laziness, that's you blocking out the feeling, removing the propulsion that you need to get things done. You may still do them, but in a low-energy, unmotivated way. Now, the people who push this functional freeze idea try to account for the functional part by saying this is not an acute stress reaction like fight or flight, or like a deer caught in the headlights, but that it's a reaction to chronic stress, a kind of compromise, rather than, as they say, the full paralysis of a classic freeze response. But there's a more straightforward way to understand this kind of reaction. It's based on decades of psychological understanding. We don't need to twist the idea of an acute stress response to make it fit non-acute situations. There's a principle from experimental psychology called learned helplessness. This began with a series of famous experiments done by the psychologist Martin Seligman back in the 1960s. I should mention that experiments like the ones I'm about to talk about are now considered unethical, but we can still learn from the fact that they were done back then. Seligman showed that animals after having been subjected to inescapable electric shocks, would later fail to save themselves from further shocks, even if escape was possible. They had learned to be helpless. For example, dogs were first subjected to electric shocks. Some of the dogs could control the shocks, other dogs in the other group couldn't. And then both groups of dogs were put in a similar situation where they were subjected to shocks, but they were able to escape that by jumping over a low barrier. And Seligman found that the dogs that previously were not able to control being shocked wouldn't try to escape. They had learned to be helpless. Similar experiments were then done on people as well, where loud noise was substituted for electric shocks. Whether done to animals or people, the subjects that had experienced learned helplessness just put up with their situation and didn't try to escape it later. They showed low energy, low motivation, and apparent depression. The situation had taught them that they were helpless and that activity was pointless. The dogs in these studies would simply lay down passively and whine. Humans likewise reported feeling frustrated and stressed, unmotivated and inefficient. In later human studies of learned helplessness, the subjective picture included feelings of hopelessness and demoralization, low self-esteem and self-blame, cognitive fog with difficulty learning from success, and emotional blunting on the surface, appearing numb or disengaged, with high physiological stress underneath. Pretty much exactly what people are describing now under the term functional freeze. So if you're living a life where the bad parts seem inescapable, where you're subjected to electric shocks or loud noise, or a noxious work environment, or family dynamics you can't do anything about, a life situation you don't want but don't see a way to escape from, then it's no surprise that you'll feel helpless. And like the dogs in those old experiments, you'll kind of lay down and whine. Or like the human subjects, you'll function more or less normally, but feel emotionally numb, disconnected, or paralyzed inside. A feeling of stuckness despite being productive. That's what we do when faced with chronic, inescapable stress. One reason I do these videos is that pop psychology, stuff on social media, keeps reinventing the wheel. Influencers hype up the latest buzzword like functional freeze, like it's a new discovery that'll revolutionize the way you understand yourself. Don't be fooled. There's nothing new under the sun. We've known about apathetic, low-energy states forever. Going through the motions without your heart being in what you're doing? Shakespeare described characters like that over 400 years ago. 150 years ago, it was called neurasthenia. It was a kind of psychiatric fad diagnosis in the late 1800s. In fact, I did a video on psychiatric fad diagnoses, including neurasthenia. You can look at that right there. Then Freud noticed it in the 1890s and called it isolation of affect. It's a word we've used ever since. We don't need a newer term for it. Isolation of affect is a perfectly good explanation for how we protect ourselves from painful, unwanted feelings as a defense mechanism. We do this in particular situations when we witness a car crash or attend a funeral or have to do something we don't want to do. If you feel numb, low energy, and unmotivated as a way to protect yourself from those feelings, that's isolation of affect. Learned helplessness, an idea that's also been around for 50 or 60 years, accounts for apathy and low motivation when you've been ground down chronically by a stressful environment. Fortunately, both of these are treatable. Psychotherapy or psychoanalysis is a good treatment for isolation of affect, mainly by providing a safe place for real feelings to come out. You can do some of this yourself without a therapist by journaling or just by being honest with yourself about your real feelings. Dr. Seligman found that learned helplessness could be relieved by giving animals or people small achievable successes, basically to relearn that they could affect their environment and make their own situation better. Both of these take time, but they're a way out. Thanks for watching. For another video on an unrecognized defense mechanism, see my video on boredom. Like apparent laziness, boredom isn't always what it seems. Please like this video if you like it, and please subscribe to my channel. I welcome your comments below, and see you next time.